next guest wasn't able to attend here in Sydney, but has a great deal to contribute to the discussion. I'd like to introduce Chris Brown. He's based in London, where he's the Chief Executive of Igloo Regeneration.
Hi, I'm Chris Brown, Chief Exec of Igloo Regeneration. Greetings from a cool autumnal London. Wish I was with you there in Sydney, but looking forward to seeing you next month, some of you next month, and getting a bit of Aussie sunshine. David Pitchford's asked me to talk a little about the Igloo Regeneration Fund that we set up over here about 12, 13 years ago to undertake urban regeneration with institutional investors on the edge of the top 20 city centres around the UK. When I was last in Sydney, I can remember driving past the site of the Bays project and thinking that's a classic Igloo project, but of course not operating in Australia and not knowing anything about it. That was the last I thought about it until this invitation from David Pitchford. So for us, it's a classic project. It could be absolutely fantastic. The Igloo Regeneration Fund is about giving commercial returns to our investors, who are a variety of local government pension funds, big fund managers, insurance companies. But they want to do that in a socially responsible way through urban regeneration. Shortly after we'd set up, the United Nations did a review of this territory and looked at all the investment vehicles that were investing in a responsible way and identified the Igloo Regeneration Fund as the first responsible real estate fund in the world. When we started up, what we were doing was entirely new, so we had to find a way of bringing together investors with regeneration opportunities. The challenge for us was to offer investors a return which was commensurate with the risks we were taking, but also the risks they perceived we were taking. Investors hadn't invested in urban regeneration before. So what we've tried to do is create a vehicle that allows people to invest both in the development phase and in the subsequent investment phase, to give them a risk and a return which is attractive in relation to the returns they can get in the wider market. Igloo's not a philanthropic fund. Igloo's entirely commercial. We're looking to give investors a return which is slightly above the market return for a risk which is also slightly above the market risk in real estate. So a typical project, the public sector would acquire the land and put in the off-site big infrastructure. We'd then go in and develop the buildings, so there's a development phase with a development return, and we'd be managing the completed investments as we were going through the wider site, building more buildings, till eventually we end up with an attractive place that's probably starting to perform in line with the wider real estate market. The bit that we can't handle in that commercial model is the long-term complex land assembly and the big off-site infrastructure. That requires government funding. That doesn't create a commercial return, but government gets its return through the taxation income that it achieves through increased economic activity that results from its provision of infrastructure. When you've got complex land assembly, which takes a long time to achieve, and also if you've got very large off-site infrastructure, which very often is like a road, is free to use. So generally it will be public sector that funds those things. On the infrastructure, the public sector will get its return through general taxation and will pay for the infrastructure out of general taxation. On the land, we very often do build now, pay later, where government holds the land and takes a share of the profit once we've taken an initial return out of the transaction. Projects typically last between, say, 5 and 25 years, depending on the scale. The bays will be probably closer to the longer end of that. And we'd look to exit when the regeneration process was maybe about 80% of the way through, and the project was starting to perform more or less like the surrounding real estate market. The projects we do, because they're not in prime locations, it would be very easy to do something ordinary which wouldn't create value. The important thing that creates value in these edge of city centre sites is creating wonderful places that people want to visit. We often start that before we start building, so we'll have meanwhile uses going on the site which start pulling people down to the site and making people understand what a potentially attractive place it can be. Very often our sites are waterside. And then as we build, we'll continue with these uses, and one of our big focus is to animate the place once we've built the first few buildings. So for example, in our scheme at Bermondsey Square, we have an antiques market which we kept running all the way through the project, and that now draws people to the square, to the development, to the neighbourhood every Friday morning. We started the fund with a cornerstone investor, Norwich Union, now part of Aviva, and then after we got the first few investments, we brought in a wider group of investors. Typically in the UK, we've got a number of local authority pension funds, some big insurance companies and some major fund managers, and one or two multi-managers as well. The fund is structured as an English limited partnership, mainly to get a tax transparent structure, so it's the investor that's taxed rather than the vehicle. Typically, we are looking at an investment period of minimum 5 years, but typically 15 years. Returns from the fund typically vary over the life of a project. So in the development phase, we typically look at an internal rate of return of around 25%. In the investment phase, maybe 10 to 12% per annum. And we tend to look at a 10-year investment cycle, so we get a blended rate of return across that period. There are one or two disadvantages. So from the point of view of investors, this is not a liquid structure, so it's hard for them to get out except at the 5-yearly breaks. None of them have exited at this stage, but if they'd wanted to for other reasons, it would have been difficult for them. It's also challenging because of the development cash flows being lumpy, and we try to manage that through debt facilities. Typically, we'd exit from a project when we felt that the regeneration effect was maybe 80% of the way through. We're happy to leave a little bit in there for the next guy, but for us, the returns that we're looking for are really at the beginning of the process. We've just exited from our scheme in Bermondsey Square in London, and we've been involved in that for about 6 years. A typical Igloo project would be edge of the top 20 city centres on a brownfield site in a deprived community, working very closely with local government. Typically they'd be the landowner. And we'd take an approach using our footprint methodology, which focused on design quality, environmental sustainability, and the health, happiness and well-being of the people who are going to live and work there. Projects range maybe from something like Bermondsey Square in London, which is about 60 million pounds sterling, 70,000 square feet, on a very small site, less than half an acre, up to Porth Tiger in Cardiff, on the edge of Cardiff Bay, 2 million square feet, 250, 300 million pounds. So a wide variety of scales.